October 28, 1968, NBC Studios, Burbank, The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. Dean Martin was halfway through a story about Frank Sinatra when Bruce Lee walked onto the stage. The audience applauded. Den stopped talking. His smile stayed in place, but something shifted in his eyes. Bruce sat down in the guest chair next to Dean. Johnny Carson made the introduction. The audience settled. Then Bruce Lee said something to Dean Martin, quietly. Just a few words. Dean's face didn't change. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He just looked at Bruce. The studio went silent. Johnny Carson leaned forward, trying to hear what was said. He couldn't. The cameras caught it all, but the microphones didn't pick it up. For 47 years, nobody knew what Bruce Lee said to Dean Martin that night. The footage exists. You can watch it. You can see Dean's reaction. You can see the tension. But you can't hear the words. Until 2015, when a Tonight Show audio engineer found the original studio recording in an NBC archive. What Bruce Lee said changed everything people thought they knew about that night. The Tonight Show was live in 1968. No delay, no editing, no second chances, no safety net. Whatever happened on that stage happened in front of millions of people. In real time, unfiltered. Raw. Dean Martin was the first guest that night. He'd been on Carson's show dozens of times, maybe 50, maybe more, always relaxed, always charming, always in control. He told stories, made jokes, sipped his drink. The audience loved him. Johnny loved him. The crew loved him. Everything was easy. That was Dean's gift, making everything look easy, making the hard work invisible, making the performance feel like a conversation. Bruce Lee was scheduled as the second guest. He was there to promote his role on the Green Hornet, to demonstrate some martial arts moves, to talk about his philosophy, to show America what this new martial art called Kung Fu was all about. Standard late-night television, the typical format. Nothing unusual planned. Nobody expected anything different. The show started at 11:30 p.m. Pacific time. Dean came out at 11:35, sat down, started talking. The conversation flowed. Dean told a story about filming a movie with Frank Sinatra. Something about Frank forgetting his lines and blaming it on Dean. The audience laughed. Johnny laughed. Dean smiled, that famous smile. The one that made everything seem like a private joke you were lucky enough to be part of. Dean had been talking for about 8 minutes when Bruce walked out. The band played. The audience applauded. Bruce waved. He wore a dark suit, looked professional, compact, muscular even in the suit. He moved differently than most guests. Later, more controlled, like every step was deliberate. He sat down in the chair next to Johnny, made the introduction. Bruce Lee, star of the Green Hornet, martial arts expert and philosopher. Bruce nodded, smiled. It was a genuine smile, warm. He seemed happy to be there. Dean extended it. They shook. Professional, cordial. The handshake was firm, brief, normal. Then Bruce leaned toward Dean and said something. His lips moved. 4 or 5 words, maybe 6. Hard to tell from the camera angle. The camera caught it. The home audience saw Bruce speaking, saw him lean in, saw his mouth move. But the microphones were positioned for Johnny, for the main conversation, for the desk. Not for side comments between guests. Not for private words. Whatever Bruce said, it was just for Dean, just between them. The viewers at home couldn't hear it. Most of the studio audience couldn't hear it either. Only Dean heard it clearly. Dean's expression changed. Not dramatically. Not obviously. Not like a movie reaction. But people who knew him noticed. The people who'd worked with him. The people who'd seen him perform 1,000 times. They noticed. The casual ease disappeared. The relaxed posture shifted. His shoulders straightened slightly. Just a fraction. His jaw tightened, barely visible. His eyes locked onto Bruce. He didn't look away, didn't blink, didn't break eye contact. Just stared, direct, steady, unflinching. The studio audience felt it. Something changed in the room. The energy shifted. The temperature dropped. Conversations stopped. People leaned forward. Something was happening. Something unexpected. something real. Johnny Carson felt it too. He'd been in television long enough to know when something went off script. He glanced between Dean and Bruce, tried to figure out what he'd missed, tried to read the situation. His smile faltered slightly. "Everything okay, gentlemen?" Johnny's voice had an edge of concern, just a touch, enough to notice if you were paying attention. Dean didn't answer immediately. He kept looking at Bruce, kept staring. His face was a mask, unreadable. The seconds stretched. 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds. On television, 4 seconds of silence is an eternity. Bruce looked back, still waiting. His posture was relaxed but ready, like a coiled spring, like water about to move. Finally, Dean spoke. "We're fine, Johnny." His voice was steady, controlled, even, but different. The smoothness was gone. The easy charm had disappeared. The warmth had evaporated. It was Dean Martin's voice, but stripped of everything that made it Don Martin. "You sure?" Johnny asked. He wasn't convinced. Neither was anyone else watching. Dean turned to Johnny. The smile came back, practiced, perfect, professional. But it didn't reach his eyes. His eyes stayed somewhere else, stayed in that moment with Bruce. "Yeah, we're good." The words were right. The tone was right. But something was off. Johnny didn't believe him. Neither did the audience. But the show had to continue. The show always had to continue. That was television. That was live performance. You keep going no matter what. Johnny started asking Bruce questions about the Green Hornet, about martial arts, about how he got started. Bruce answered. He was articulate, intriguing. He demonstrated a punch, showed the speed, the precision, the power. The audience applauded. Johnny looked impressed. Bruce talked about martial arts philosophy, about how it wasn't just about fighting, about how it was about understanding yourself, about control, about discipline. Dean sat in his chair silent, watching. His posture hadn't relaxed. He'd pulled back slightly. Not obviously, just enough to create distance, to create space. The camera cut to him occasionally, standard procedure during a multi-guest segment. His face was unreadable, stone. His eyes tracked Bruce, followed his movements, studied him, not with hostility, with something else, something harder to define. The audience at home wondered what had happened. What had they missed? What had Bruce said? Why did Dean look different? Letters poured into NBC the next day. Hundreds of them. By the end of the week, over 1,000. What did Bruce Lee say to Dean Martin? What did Dean look so angry? What happened on that show? Was that staged? Were they fighting? Okay. Is Bruce okay? What's going on? NBC had no answers. The producers reviewed the footage, watched it a dozen times, tried to read Bruce's lips, couldn't figure it out. The angle was wrong. The resolution wasn't good enough. 1968 television technology couldn't capture it. They asked the cameraman, the stage crew, the audio engineers, the guys who'd been in the studio, the guys who might have heard something. Nobody knew. Nobody had heard the words. They'd only seen the reaction. Johnny Carson asked Dean about it after the show. Backstage, in Dean's dressing room, Dean was packing his things, getting ready to leave, putting his bow tie in a case, folding his jacket, moving methodically, deliberately. "Dino, what was that about?" Johnny closed the door behind him, kept his voice low. Dean didn't look up. Nothing. He kept packing, kept moving. "Come on. Something happened out there. I've known you 10 years. That wasn't nothing. Drop it, Johnny." The tone was final, absolute. No room for discussion. Johnny knew that tone. He'd heard it before, from Dean, from Frank, from guys who meant what they said. Dean was done talking. The conversation was over. No appeal, no negotiation. Johnny left. Dean finished packing and walked out. He never mentioned that night again, not to Johnny, not to Frank, not to anyone who asked. Bruce Lee was asked about it too. By reporters, by fellow actors, by friends, by students, by people who were curious, by people who'd heard the rumors. He smiled, gave vague answers, deflected. Redirected. Just a misunderstanding. Nothing important. Television drama? You know how these things get blown up. Nobody believed him either. The smile was too calm. The answers were too smooth. The deflection was too practice spread. Fast, wild, elaborate. Some people thought it was a publicity stunt. NBC trying to create buzz, generate ratings, get people talking, get people watching. It worked. The ratings for that episode were higher than usual, significantly higher. But if it was staged, nobody involved ever confirmed it. Not then. Not later. Not ever. Others believed Bruce Lee threatened Dean, said something aggressive, something confrontational, something meant to intimidate, something about how actors weren't real tough guys, how martial artists were the real deal. Dean, being Dean, refused to back down, refused to show fear, refused to give Bruce the satisfaction. This theory had legs. It fit both men's reputations. Bruce as a warrior, a fighter, someone who didn't back down. Dean as someone who never bent, never broke, someone who'd faced down mob bosses and studio executives and never flinched. Rumors spread that Dean was actually scared, that he stayed silent because he didn't know what to do, that Bruce had rattled him, that for once in his life, Dean Martin lost control of a situation, that the king of cool got frozen. This theory was popular with people who wanted to believe Dean Martin was just an act, just a persona, not really that cool, not really that controlled. NBC executives thought it might have been staged between Dean and Bruce without telling anyone else. A private joke that got out of hand. Two professionals creating a moment, creating tension, creating television. But neither man ever admitted to it. Neither man ever winked at the camera. The press speculated for weeks. Gossip columns ran stories. Variety covered it. Hollywood Reporter mentioned it. The night Bruce Lee faced down Dean Martin. What really happened on Carson? Through confrontation nobody understands. Dean Martin's mystery moment. Bruce Lee's secret words. All wrong. Every single theory, wrong. Every speculation, every guess, every elaborate explanation, wrong. The truth was something else entirely, something nobody guessed. Something simpler, something deeper, something that stayed hidden for 47 years. Now, you might think this was just a tense moment on live television. 2 stars, 1 stage. A brief, uncomfortable silence. Television was full of moments like this. Celebrities clashed, egos collided, things got awkward, misunderstandings happened, tensions flared. It happened all the time, every week, every show. Some guest said something wrong. Some host pushed too far. Some conversation went sideways. That was live television. That was the risk. That was why people watched. But here's what makes this different. Dean Martin had been in situations like this before. Real confrontations, real tension, real danger, real moments where he had to make a choice, where he had to decide who he was and what he stood for. In 1965, a mob boss came to see Dean perform at the Sands, sent word backstage that he wanted Dean to dedicate a song to his girlfriend, make an announcement, say her name, give her the spotlight. Dean refused. The boss sent another message. More insistent, more direct, less polite. Dean still refused. The boss showed up at Dean's dressing room after the show, 2 bodyguards with him. Big guys, quiet guys. The kind of guys who made their living being intimidating. Dean didn't flinch, didn't apologize, didn't explain. Just looked at the man and said, "I don't take requests from anyone." The boss stared at him. The bodyguards tensed. The room got quiet. Dean stared back. Didn't move. Didn't blink. Finally, the boss laughed, nodded, appreciated the balls, walked away. Dean went back to packing his things. In 1956, when Dean and Jerry Lewis split up, reporters tried to get Dean to trash Jerry, to say something mean, something angry, something bitter, something quotable, something that would sell papers. Dean refused. Every time, every interview, every question, he'd smile and say, "Jerry's talented. We had different ideas about the act. That's all." People pushed, Reporters pushed harder, offered him opportunity steps, easy shots. Dean wouldn't take them, wouldn't budge. Even when Jerry talked about him, even when Jerry said things in interviews, even when the breakup got ugly in public and painful, Dean stayed silent, stayed above it, stayed controlled. In 1963, on a movie set, a stunt coordinator wanted to use a dangerous stunt without proper safety equipment, without proper preparation, without proper testing, wanted to save money, wanted to save time, wanted to get the shot and move on. Dean refused to do the scene, refused to let his stunt double do it, refused to let anyone do it. The director threatened him, said he'd be replaced, said he was being difficult, said he was holding up production. Dean said, "Then replace me." Calm even. The stunt was changed. The safety equipment was brought in. The scene was done right. Each time, Dean made a choice. And each time that choice revealed who he really was. Someone who didn't bend, didn't break, didn't compromise when it mattered. Someone who knew where his lines were and didn't cross them. Someone who understood that real power was saying no. This night with Bruce Lee, this was another one of those moments. Another choice. Another line, another test. But the audience didn't know that yet. Didn't understand what they'd witnessed. Didn't have the context. Didn't have the information. Didn't have the missing piece. The mystery deepened over the years. People who were in the studio that night were interviewed, tracked down, asked to remember, asked what they saw, what they heard, what they felt. A woman from the audience in 1987. I was sitting in the third row, close enough to see everything. I saw Bruce lean over. I saw Dean's face change. It was like watching ice form. He went completely cold. I've never seen anything like it. One second he was warm and charming. The next second he was stone. A cameraman in 1993. I've worked television for 30 years. I've seen everything. Arguments, fights, celebrities storming off, breakdowns, all of it. But that moment between Dean and Bruce, that was different. The air in the studio changed. Everyone felt it. It was like the temperature dropped 10 degrees. You could feel the tension. It was physical, real. A NBC page in 2001. After the show, people were buzzing, standing in the hallways, asking each other what happened. What did Bruce say? Why did Dean react like that? Nobody knew. But everyone agreed something real, something important. It wasn't staged. You can't fake that kind of energy. The footage got analyzed, frame by frame. Film students studied it. Television historians examined it. Documentaries included it. Lip readers tried to decode what Bruce said. They came up with different answers, different interpretations, different possibilities. "You're not as tough as you think I could take you. One should settle this outside. I know what you really are. Stop pretending." All speculation, all guesses, all wrong. None confirmed, none verified, none even close. Dean's friends were asked about it. Interviewed, pressed for information. Frank Sinatra in a 1989 interview. Dino never talked about that night. I asked him once. Just once. He changed the subject. That was his way. If he didn't want to discuss something, it didn't exist. You learned not to push. You learned to respect the boundaries. Sammy Davis jeered in 1985. I heard Bruce Lee. Yeah, about that. Saw the footage. Never got the full story. Dean kept things locked up. Always did. Even with us. Even with the guys he trusted most. Some things were private. Some things stayed private. Joey Bishop in 1998. Something happened. I know that much. I could see it in Den's eyes. But Dean, he wasn't scared. I can tell you that. Dean Martin wasn't scared of anyone. Not mob bosses. Not studio heads. Not Bruce Lee. Not anybody. That wasn't fear. That was something else. Bruce Lee's associates were interviewed too. His students, his friends, his colleagues, people who knew him, people who trained with him. One of his students in 1992, Bruce respected Dan Martin. That's all I can say. I know that for certain. There was respect there. Real respect. Bruce didn't respect many people. But when he did, It was absolute. Another martial artist in 2003, Bruce told me once that strength comes in different forms. He said Dean Martin understood that. I didn't know what he meant at the time. I thought he was just making conversation. But now I think he was trying to tell me something important. Linda Lee, Bruce's widow, was asked in 2008. She said she never heard Bruce mention that night, never heard him talk about Dean Martin beyond what anyone else knew, beyond what was public. If Bruce told her something, she kept it private, kept it protected. The mystery became legend, became folklore, became part of Hollywood history. Film students studied the footage, wrote papers about it, analyzed the body language, the micro-expressions, the tension. Documentaries mentioned it. Books about Dean Martin included a chapter. Books about Bruce Lee referenced it. Television specials covered it. But nobody knew. Nobody had the answer. Nobody could solve it. The 70s passed. The 80s, the 90s. Both men were gone. Dean died in 1995. Christmas Day, 78 years old. Bruce had died in 1973. Way too young, 32 years old. The truth seemed buried forever. Lost to time. Lost to silence. Then in 2015, an audio engineer named Robert Klein was digitizing old Tonight Show recordings. NBC was creating an archive, converting old tapes to digital files, preserving television history, making sure these moments didn't disappear. Klein was working through 1968 episodes, going chronologically, month by month, show by show. He got to October 28th, the Dean Martin and Bruce Lee episode, the famous one, the one everyone talked about. He started the digitization process. The main audio track played through his headphones. Normal, expected, the conversation between Johnny and Dean, the audience laughter, Bruce's entrance. Standard Tonight Show audio. Then he noticed something. Something unexpected. Something interesting. The original recording had multiple audio tracks, not just one. Not just the main mix. One for the main microphones, one for the audience mix, one for the studio monitors, and one for the stage area mix. Backup microphones that recorded everything on stage. Just for safety. Just in case something went wrong with the main system. Klein isolated the stage track, the backup recording, enhanced it, cleaned up the background noise, filtered out the interference, used modern software, used modern techniques, used tools that didn't exist in 1968. And there it was, clear as day, Bruce Lee's voice. Clear, unmistakable, perfect. What Bruce Lee said to Dean Martin that night was this: "My teacher spoke highly of you. He said you were the only man in Hollywood who understood respect without needing to prove it." Dean's response, barely audible, quiet, controlled. "Who was your teacher?" Bruce, clear, direct, simple. "Ip Man. He met you in 1959, you probably don't remember." Dean, after a pause, after a breath, after a moment, "I remember." That was it. That was the entire exchange. 29 words, maybe 30, 15 seconds. No threat, no challenge, no confrontation, no aggression, no hostility. Bruce Lee had been giving Dean Martin a compliment, a message from his martial arts teacher, an acknowledgement of respect, a completion of a circle. So why did Dean react the way he did? Why did the room go tense? Why did it look like a confrontation? Why did everyone think something hostile had happened? Because it was a confrontation, just not the kind anyone thought, not the kind anyone expected. In 1959, Dean Martin was filming a movie in Hong Kong, not Ocean's 11, that didn't shoot there. But Dean took a side trip, personal travel, private time. He wanted to see the city, wanted to disappear, wanted to not be Dean Martin for a few days. While there, he visited a martial arts school. Someone recommended it. A driver, a hotel clerk, someone. Curiosity, interest, maybe research for a role, maybe just wanting to see something real, something authentic. The school belonged to Ip Man, the legendary Wing Chun master, Bruce Lee's teacher, the man who would later become famous, who would later be the subject of movies. But in 1959, he was just a teacher, a master, a man who ran a small school. Dean watched a class, stayed for an hour, maybe longer, watched the students practice, Watch the precision. Watch the control. Watch the discipline. At the end, Ip Man approached him. They talked. Through a translator, a student who spoke English. Ip Man asked Dean why he came. What brought him there? Dean said he was interested in discipline, in control, in mastery, in understanding how people achieve excellence. Ip Man asked Dean what he did, what his profession was. Dean said he was an entertainer, a singer, someone who performed. Ip Man asked if Dean had mastered his art, if he considered himself excellent. Dean thought about it, really thought, then said, "I've learned to make it look easy." Ip Man smiled. Understood immediately. That is mastery, making strength look effortless, making hard work invisible. That is the highest level, Doc. They talked for another hour, maybe two, about philosophy, about control, about the difference between looking strong and being strong, about the difference between performance and substance, about the difference between ego and confidence. Ip Man said something that stayed with Dean, something that changed him. A man who needs to show his strength has already lost. A man who simply is strong never needs to prove anything. True power is quiet. True mastery is invisible. Dean never forgot that, carried it with him, let it shape how he approached everything. 9 years later, when Bruce Lee mentioned Ip Man on that stage, Dean remembered the conversation, remembered the lesson, remembered the respect he'd felt for that teacher. But he also remembered something else. The reason he'd been in Hong Kong in 1959. The reason he'd sought out that martial arts school. The reason he'd needed that conversation. Dean had been running from something. From the pressure. From the constant performance. From the weight of being Dan Martin. From the expectation. From the persona. From the mask. He'd gone to Hong Kong to disappear, to not be recognized, to not be the king of cool for a few days, to just be Dino. And in that martial arts school, watching Ip Man teach, Dean had found something: peace, clarity, control. Not through fighting, not through aggression, through stillness, through presence, through simply being. When Bruce mentioned Ip Man on that stage, all of that came back: the memory, the feeling, the moment of clarity, the private moment, the vulnerable moment. And Dean realized something. Bruce knew. Somehow, Bruce knew what that visit had meant. Knew that Dan had been searching for something. Knew that Ip Man had helped him find it. That's why Dean went silent. That's why the tension filled the room. Not because of anger, not because of hostility, because of recognition, because of exposure, because of vulnerability. Bruce Lee had just acknowledged something deeply personal, something Dean had never talked about, something private, something sacred, and he'd done it on live television, in front of millions of people, in front of Johnny Carson, in front of the cameras, in front of the world. Dean's silence wasn't hostility, it was processing, it was remembering, it was feeling, it was deciding how to respond. If you had been in that chair, what would you have done? Would you have laughed it off, or stayed silent like Dean did? Bruce understood. That's why he stayed calm. Why he didn't push. Why he didn't explain. Why he let the silence sit. He delivered his message, Ip Man's message. The completion of a circle. The rest was up to Dean. The rest was private. Johnny Carson didn't understand. The audience didn't understand. The viewers didn't understand. But Bruce and Dean understood each other perfectly. Completely. Absolutely. After the show ended, after the cameras stopped rolling, after the audience left, Dean went back to his dressing room. He sat down, stared at the mirror, stared at himself, at the face everyone recognized, at the persona everyone knew. Someone knocked on the door. 3 knocks. Quiet. Come in. Bruce Lee stepped inside, closed the door behind him. They looked at each other. No cameras. No audience. No performance. Just 2 men. Dean spoke first. How is he? A Ip Man passed away last year. Dean looked down, felt the loss. I'm sorry to hear that. He remembered you, talked about you sometimes, said you were one of the few who understood. Understood what? That real strength is quiet. Dean smiled. Just a little. Just slightly. He taught me that in one afternoon. Must have taken you years. Bruce smiled back. Longer than that. I'm still learning. They sat in silence for a moment. Not awkward. Not tense. Just two men who understood something most people didn't. Just two men who'd learned from the same teacher. Finally, Dean stood up, extended his hand. Bruce shook it. Firm. Respectful. Complete. Thank you for the message, Dean said. He wanted you to know? Bruce left. Dean finished packing his things. Went home. Never told anyone about the conversation. Never mentioned it. Never explained it. Bruce never told anyone either. The respect between them stayed private. The way both men preferred. The way Ip Man would have wanted. Robert Klein, the audio engineer who found the recording, released his findings in 2016. A small audio blog, technical, detailed. Not many people read it. A few news outlets picked it up. Ron Small stories. Backpage stuff. A mystery of Dean Martin and Bruce Lee finally solved. After 47 years, the truth about that night. But most people missed it. The story had become legend by then. Mythology. People preferred the mystery to the truth. Preferred the confrontation to the reality. Preferred the drama to the simplicity. Because the reality was quieter. Simpler. Less dramatic. Two men recognizing strength in each other. Two men honoring a teacher. Two men understanding that power doesn't need to be loud. Dean Martin's philosophy was always this: control yourself and you control the room. Never show weakness. Never show uncertainty. Make everything look easy. Make the hard work invisible. Make the mastery seem effortless. Bruce Lee's philosophy was similar but different. Be like water. Adapt. Flow. Respond, but maintain your core, maintain your center, maintain your truth. That night, both philosophies met, not in conflict, in alignment, in recognition, in respect. The tension the audience felt wasn't hostility. It was intensity, the intensity of two people operating on a level most people don't reach, the intensity of mutual recognition, the intensity of respect, the intensity of understanding. Dean Martin never stepped back because he didn't need to. He wasn't being challenged. He wasn't being threatened. He was being honored. He was being seen. He was being acknowledged. Bruce Lee stepped forward because that's what a student does. That's what respect requires. He delivered his teacher's message, completed a circle, closed a loop, honored his lineage. The audience saw a confrontation because that's what they expected. Two alpha males, one stage, tension, drama, conflict, celebrity ego, Hollywood nonsense. But what actually happened was the opposite. It was connection, acknowledgement, respect, recognition, truth. The footage still exists. You can still watch it. You can still see the moment. It's on YouTube. It's in archives. It's preserved forever. But now, if you know what to look for, you see something different. You see Bruce Lee honoring his teacher. You see Dean Martin remembering a moment that changed him. You see two forms of strength recognizing each other. You see what real power looks like. Not loud, not aggressive, not dramatic, not performative. Just present, just there, just real. Real strength doesn't always raise its voice. Sometimes it simply refuses to move. If you value stories like this, there's an entire Dean Martin playlist waiting for you here.